Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting for Pasco Council on this evening of August 19th, 2019. We have agendas available on the corner here if you'd like to follow along, or a more detailed council packet is available through the city's website. We also televise our meeting on Charter Cable Channel 191, as well as through the city's website. Those are available for review, and also Facebook Live as well. If you have any cell phones, I'd ask you to mute those so that the meeting isn't interrupted. And if you get a chance to speak with council, you'd come to the podium, and if you share your name with us, we'd be grateful for our record keeping. With housekeeping taken care of, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Alvarado.
Present.
Barajas.
Present.
Maloney.
Here.
Martinez.
Present.
Milne.
Present.
Serrano.
Present.
Watkins.
Here.
7 present.
And if you join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Third item on the agenda is the consent agenda, and we consider these items to be routine, and we'll do them as a single roll call vote unless a member of the council or the member of the public wants something considered separately. Those items include the approval of minutes from the August 5th, 2019 meeting. Item B, to approve a resolution related to a program year 2020 Community Development Block Grant Allocation Annual Work Plan. Item C, to approve claims in the total amount of $3,585,913.52, as well as to approve bad debt write-off for utility, billing, ambulance, and other funds in the amount of $330,467.18, with a portion of that, $142,132.48, to be turned over to collections. Item D, to approve a resolution approving federal 2020 home annual work plan and allocation. Item E, to approve resolution for the 2020 NSP program year annual work plan and allocation. And finally, to approve, item F, to approve agreement for services with the Franklin County Historical Society and authorize the manager to sign that document. Those are the items on the agenda. Anything to be removed? Hearing none, Mr. Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
I'll ask the, moved and seconded by Ms. Barajas. I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Watkins.
Yes.
Alvarado.
Yes.
Barajas.
Yes.
Maloney.
Yes.
Martinez.
Yes.
Milne.
Yes.
Serrano.
Yes.
Unanimous, yes.
With that, our consent agenda is approved. So we go on. Nothing under proclamations and acknowledgements this evening. So we go to 5 visitors other than agenda items. Anybody here this evening wish to talk about an item that's not further along on the agenda? And I'm not seeing any hands raised. So we'll go on to item 6, reports from committees or officers. Anybody attend an event or meeting they wish to share with council? And Mr. Milne.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, on Thursday, I attended the ribbon cutting ceremony for the Great American Powder Coating and Echo Blasting, and I got the great privilege of meeting Nick and Will. They showed me around, and really good business here in Pasco that we could well use, and just glad to see people coming to Pasco. And then after that, on Thursday, late Thursday, I also attended the DPDA meeting. It wasn't as exciting as they normally are. It was kind of depressing. We actually, Cinco de Mayo actually lost quite a lot of money, which is frustrating. I know the other events do bring in money. They said they would still bring in money at the end of the year, and we're finding ways to build a stronger event next year without losing money. So that was all.
Thanks for working on that one. That one's, it's always easy when they're run perfectly, but the test is also when you got some stuff to work through.
It can be a challenge.
Okay. Mr. Alvarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to report I attended the Ben Franklin Council of Governments meeting and the board meeting. And one of the items I think to perhaps bring to the attention of the council is there are some funds available for large metropolitan areas like Seattle, Spokane, and we are considered one of those because of our population. And so there was some conversation around the idea of perhaps adjusting those boundary lines so that other jurisdictions that are a little farther out would also benefit from that. There's nothing was decided, but it's probably a conversation that will be had at, in future meetings. So just something I want to keep the city abreast of, perhaps even having some form of city kind of have an indication of where perhaps where the city would stand on a decision like that.
And I'd just be a question, do they tend to be transportation-related funds, or?
Correct.
Okay, mostly, okay.
And this is a specific fund, not for generally everything, but this is a specific fund that was allocated for urban large areas.
Urban large areas, okay. Ms. Brajas?
Thank you, Mayor. I actually, last week when we were talking about going over to the National Night Out events, there was an incident that I forgot to mention, and I did mention it to staff. But I do want to give a shout out to Pasco Police Department, and in particular to Officer Ray Aparicio. Officer Ray Aparicio, when we showed up to the Memorial Park, there was a young lady that approached him and came up to him, said hello to him, asked him for a hug. He was a little hesitant, and so she was looking at him and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" He said no. So she goes on and tells him the story, how they met. He actually arrested her. And on the drive over to juvie, he was lecturing her pretty much. And whatever he said changed her ways, because she is now, she has her GED, she's going to CBC, she's taking classes, she's doing criminal justice, and told him because of him, she wants to be a police officer. So just wanted to mention that, and thank you for the great work you guys do. And thank you, Officer Ray, for changing someone's life, impacting them that way.
Great story.
Thank you.
No other reports, then we're going to go on with the agenda. We're going to go to item 7. We don't have any hearings or council actions on that section, but on section 8, ordinances and resolutions not relating to hearings, we have an item related to Department of Natural Resources Aquatic Lands Lease, specifically Chiawana Park Western Dock. Mr. Ratkai.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Good evening, Zach Ratkai, Administrative and Community Services Director. The item brought before you this evening is a Department of Natural Resources lease. It's for the westernmost dock at Chiawana Park, which is located in the vicinity, generally in the vicinity of Road 96 and Schumann Lane. This lease is known as a Joint Aquatics Resources Permit, or JARPA for short. This particular lease covers the encroachment of the dock into the Columbia River. The last action on this lease occurred in 2007, with the current agreement expiring at the end of this month, August 31st, 2019. The lease that's brought before you guys this evening is a 12-year lease renewal for the joint city-state use of this dock facility. It is a no-cost lease for the duration of this term, and with its acceptance, the lease would run through August 31st of 2031. The United States Army Corps of Engineers has been informed of this lease and has been made aware of this renewal action. We've received no feedback contrary to any approvals for this. And staff humbly asks City Council to recommend approval of this lease and have the city manager sign it.
Questions or a motion? Mr. Martinez.
Question?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Radke, maybe you can help out. As I was skimming through the contract and the lease, I noticed where the city is responsible for things such as, upkeeping, cleaning, and it also mentioned about spills. My question to you is, in the event that a citizen, now, again, appreciate that this is a great a privilege we have to be able to use the dock at Chiawana, and it's used tremendously. I personally use it all the time. But if there was to be a spill from a community member, what happens? Is the city totally going to take liability of that, or is there an insurance? Would the community members that is using it or cause a spill, or would they insurance cover that? I don't know if it's something you could answer tonight, but I was just curious that as the city is responsible for all those things that are happening, and if there was to be something that would go into the water and river, is that something that we can go back on the insurers, on the person that caused the insurance, or is that something the city has to take on completely?
That is something I can certainly find out for the council.
I was just curious, as I was just skimming through it, and it's a pretty big liability we're taking on, but definitely a benefit to many in the city, but I was just wondering, it'd be nice if we could find that out.
We'll track down that information for you.
Thank you.
And I would just add, isn't going to prevent you from being able to, if we make a decision on it tonight.
Oh, no. The lease is the lease is valid.
Okay.
It's something that we've had for many years. The last time we did this was back in '07, I think it was. And it's a 12-year lease. No, there's no reason why I wouldn't accept it because the city's been, had this liability the whole time. I was just wondering
Details.
the details of that, so,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go ahead and move to approve the aquatics land lease number 20A81594 with the Washington State Department of Natural Resources for public use and access of recreational dock on the Columbia River, and further authorize the city manager to execute the lease.
It's been moved and seconded by
I'll second.
Mr. Martinez. Other discussion on this? Mr. Maloney.
Thank you. I do have one question, Mr. Ratkai. In the case that within the next 12 years there's a potential for the River Shore reconveyance effort that's going on, in what way would this lease potentially be impacted by that effort? Obviously this is a zero-cost lease, so it's not like we're worried about rent, but the severability on this, I didn't see much language in there in terms of what something like that would look like in case the conditions dramatically changed.
And that's another great question as well, because I think the primary focus of the River Shore reconveyance has been federal leases, federal lands. This is with the state of Washington, and I know that was a separate process altogether. So I think, from a staff perspective, we maintain the lease for 12 years. Should we get to River Shore reconveyance, handle the state leases at that time? I believe it would remain as the same. I mean, we're not paying for anything here. We're maintaining it. When we last added to the dock, that was on the city cost and everything. So we work out those details at that time, but we can certainly find out what would happen as far as severability of the lease as well.
Okay, thank you.
That.
Any other questions? And just, I'm noting, I'm on my doing memory, we have 3 boat launches, if I recall, in Pasco. We have this one, we have Road 52, and we also have the Pasco Boat Basin. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So we've got three boat launches. We should always try and keep those open for the public to be able to get boats on and off the river. So this is great to keep this going. Mr. Serrano.
Thank you. Mr. Rakai, do you know if this requires a SEPA approval from the state as a state action of leasing land, or as you mentioned, the Army Corps of Engineers, whether there's involvement there requiring an environmental impact statement under NEPA or probably wouldn't be an EIS, but a NEPA study?
Those were all taken care of in 2007 with the
Okay.
original construction or the original extension of the dock through the files. So therefore, any renewals of that, we weren't proposing any new construction or any changes to the location or shape of the dock.
Okay.
So those weren't applicable at this time.
Thank you. I just know sometimes leasing land qualifies under NEPA in particular as a federal action. I mean, regardless, we can approve it, and if we end up having to do a study or whatever the case is, we'll talk to you about that again.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for your vote. All those in favor of approving the lease signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Go to item B, related to a PACE engineering amendment related to a lift station project. Mr. Worley.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We had a presentation on this last week, and there have been no changes since then. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or a motion? Mr. Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve amendment number 3 for the professional services agreement with Pace Engineering for the Columbia East Force Main and Lift Station project, and further authorize the city manager to execute the amendment.
I'll see.
Seconded by Mr. Serrano on this one. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. And also, Mr. Worley, this is related to a sediment pond clean out. We talked about actually at length last week. Any updated?
Yes, we do. We have 2 small updates. The agreement that you have before you is slightly revised from the last one that was presented last week. You'll notice on page, well, I'm not sure which page of the agreement it is. It's 83 of your packet. But it's section 27B. We added some clarification and a link to the prevailing wage website that we are required to do. This is a public works project, not by department, but by definition of state law. And so we are required to pay prevailing wages. The second thing is that we added section 28 to the agreement, which is the insurance requirement for the contractor, and they have agreed to provide the insurance certificate to show that they have that coverage. And that's it.
Questions or a motion? Mr. Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the professional services agreement for the processed water reuse facility holding pond sediment removal with Bioterra, and further authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
It's been moved and seconded by Mr. Alvarado. Discussion on this one, Mr. Maloney? Or, no?
Good.
I think we also talked about we'll be interested, we understand it's gonna be this isn't something that happens one day, and there's some different phases to it. So I imagine oversight will be particularly careful to not exacerbate things if at all reasonably possible.
That is correct.
And looking for the results of our odor, helping with our odor situation. So and if you could keep council apprised of that, if during the project something changes, we'd appreciate knowing about it.
We sure will.
Okay. And with that, then the question back to council. If there are no other questions or discussion, all those in favor of the professional services agreement say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion carries unanimously. With that, we are through section 8, and we have no unfinished business or new business. We go to 11, miscellaneous discussion. Mr. Zabel, any thoughts?
I had two items, Mayor. One, I forwarded council a letter we received from the Colville tribe regarding attendance at the recent get-together meeting that they scheduled with the city. And very positive letter, I think very indicative of the level of sophistication at which they're operating. And so we look forward to meeting with them further. They have an invitation included in that letter for myself and council members to make a trip up to their headquarters and learn a little bit more about their operation as well. And then secondly, I would have our Administrative and Community Services Director introduce our new city clerk who's in the audience tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Zabel and members of council. I would like to introduce Deb Barham there, stand up there. Deb comes to us from the city of Richland, where she is, I guess, currently the deputy city clerk there. So she's going to be joining us next Monday as city clerk here, and we're very excited to have her. She's got over 15 years experience with the city of Richland, and glad to keep her in the community and have her contribute to our great efforts and missions here at the city of Pasco.
And also, I want to acknowledge and thank Angela Pashan for stepping in. Angela's our policy analyst, and she very readily jumped at the opportunity to step in, help us here, learned a lot about public records. She was not on a track to be a city clerk, so it's probably more about public records than she ever wanted to learn. But I want to thank her for doing that, and looking forward to her coming back up to the third floor.
Appreciate that. And Mr. Zabel, pointing out that your staff approach as a leadership perspective, and as well as the practical way that your staff fill in spots in and I'm going to be quite blunt. I'd gotten used to kind of a Pasco model. If somebody's in the position, I'm going to stick with it. But actually understand Ms. Pashan's is able to work a lot of different positions in the baseball field, so to speak, using the sports analogy. Is very encouraging and a great model for working with staff. So thank you, Mr. Zabel, for encouraging and supporting that approach.
So before, Leo DeRocher or Casey Stengel were incredible baseball managers for decades, they were great utility infielders and could play almost any position.
So is that a harbinger that you're going to be clerk next, or you're going to do mow some lawns? Try that out?
Nope.
Okay.
It was more about Angela. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks again, staff, and appreciate the new clerk coming on, and also being part of the Tri-Cities. It's great to have somebody come over from a peer city as well. With that, miscellaneous discussion. Mr. Zabel's covered. Any council members, anything to bring up? Ms. Brajas?
Yes, I do want to make a mention, shine some light on Pete Serrano. It was his birthday this past week. Happy birthday.
We're not sure if he's excited about the birthday or not. Any other miscellaneous discussion? Hearing none, we go to 12. Is there a need for any executive session, Mr. Zabel?
Not this evening.
Well, okay, 20 minutes into the meeting, we're adjourned. Thank you all for coming.